Well, the highway's jammed with broken scooters on an electric-powered drive, but not anymore in Dallas. Hi, I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, and this episode of Right Angles brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. Gentlemen, Dallas City Council has said, as we record this, that by the end of this week, all of the electric scooters need to be off the streets of Dallas. And that doesn't mean that's the end forever, but apparently they are concerned that people are not obeying the city ordinances put in place to regulate these scooters, that they've had complaints from a lot of customers who are not customers, but people who live in Dallas, both as pedestrians, complaining about e-scooters, as they call them, driving on the sidewalks, as well as the reckless behavior of scooter drivers on the streets. And just to give you an idea of the impact of this, there are at least 4 different companies operating e-scooters. They're called dockless vehicles in Dallas. The companies include Bird, Lime, Uber, and I don't know if it's Ojo or Oho, O-J-O. But for 2 years they've been doing this, and there are some 15,000 scooters on the streets in Dallas and north of the city. Stephen Green, this was just a kind of a problem or a solution waiting for a problem that a lot of, especially people from the left, want to make sure that that we're not driving so many cars on the road. So wouldn't it be great if we would just allow electric scooters everywhere and people could just pick one up and drive it wherever they were going and then drop it off there? It kind of comes into that category of sort of unforeseen consequences, don't you think, Steve?
Unexpectedly is the thing we always say at Instapundit, when the exact awful thing everybody knew would happen happens. I understand micromobility is a very big deal, especially in congested cities. And this is especially true in Europe, where the whole micromobility movement was born, because European cities are older and tend to have much narrower streets and a lot less parking and, no room to grow out the suburbs and all that. And the problem with the scooters themselves, like with the bikes and all that, is we're always trying to outlaw the tragedy of the commons, and you can't. Public property just doesn't get treated as well as private property does, and so you ended up with all these banged up bikes and banged up scooters and all the rest. But what I'm reminded of here, and forgive me if this explanation is a little roundabout, remember when Don Rumsfeld said at the early part of the war on terror back in 2001 and 2, when we were especially getting prepared for Iraq, you go to war with the army you have. And the press raked him over the coals for that, but it's a very true statement. Rumsfeld might not have been a very good SecDef, but he was brilliant at pointing out the obvious to people who really needed to get beaten with clue bats from time to time. But the other thing you have to remember is you go to war with the people you have. And this is why I will never advocate another war that I don't think we can win within 3 to 4 years, because it is historical fact that after about 3 years of any given war, the American people get fed up with it and start looking for the exits. It was true in the Civil War. It was true in World War II. It was true in Vietnam particularly, and it became very true in Iraq as well. That said, I told you this was going to be a little roundabout. I fell in love with traffic circles when I was in Europe a few years ago, driving around all over the place, because they just move the traffic more efficiently. I liked the whole idea of the scooters, again, with these crowded, tiny streets, little cities. But the American people are not trained for traffic circles. We've got them all over Colorado Springs now, and people come up and they stop or they burst through into the traffic. They don't know how to work the damn traffic circles, and it drives me nuts. Same thing with the scooters. I tried to ride my 10-year-old's hoverboard when he first got it a couple of years ago, and I nearly died. Meanwhile, he's racing around on the thing like a total pro. So if you're going to try and do these things, you have to keep in mind that the American people are individuals. We're not into this whole micro mobility. We're all going to get along in the traffic. We want big damn cars, and we want to drive them as fast as we can. That's the people we are, and you can't force us to do things that our culture has not attuned us into doing.
Bill Whittle, the interesting thing about the timing of this decision to pull these scooters from the streets with the Dallas City Council is that they had just recently passed new regulations regarding scooters and a new fee structure and how that would all work. And then all of a sudden, well, perhaps the inciting incident happened in an area called Deep Ellum, which is a kind of a downtown area that has a lot of bars and restaurants and things like that, little shops. In Deep Ellum over the weekend, there was a shooting. 5 or 6 people were injured in that shooting. And it is thought that e-scooters contribute to late night gatherings. And so one of the things they're looking at is how can we regulate that so that we don't wind up with flash mobs in scenes like they had in Deep Ellum this weekend.
Well, first of all, Deep Ellum sounds like a suburb of Middle Earth rather than Dallas.
It's a great name.
Yeah. I don't know whether that's going to come to California. They're extremely popular here in Los Angeles. I think if they were banned in LA, we'd start to see some serious violence. There's a number of progressive bike gangs that have used these electric scooters. They don't have the leather jackets. They've got kind of the crocheted ones and the Andes kind of caps. It's like the Soy Boys, for example. They're extremely popular in the neighborhood I'm in. And by the way, I'm not too far from the freeway. And when those guys are coming, when you hear a whole gang of those guys and those electric scooters, you can tell they're coming a mile away, because all of a sudden it gets very, very quiet. and then the traffic noise picks up again. I think the problem, it's one of these things where it's kind of like, there are some people out there, it's like, this is why we can't have nice things, because some significant enough number of people just ditch them on the road, ditch them in the streets, throw them into the revetment, leave them in a garbage dumpster because they're having, there's just enough people to make sure that it's just not going to work. I think we've often talked to Natasha and I about to be fun to do, but we often see them just lying there someplace where somebody dropped them off. I haven't got the faintest idea where to pick them up, honestly, and that's the part that's more interesting to me. So there's that, and there's also, as a couple of you pointed out, is the safety issue. I'm reminded of my childhood in Bermuda, where being a British colony, you would drive on the left side of the road, and these American tourists would come to our hotel and rent mobilettes. Go with a Moby. Anyway, mopeds. And since the speed limit was 20 miles an hour on the entire island, we didn't see too many serious accidents. We saw an awful lot of people going down and skinning like half of their legs on their honeymoon because they need to make a left turn, and you get the general idea.
Yeah.
I think this is the kind of thing where I don't really know that the state really has the right to ban them exactly. But again, if they're just being dumped on public streets, and that's been my experience out here in LA, is that people or in your yard or whatever, then they become kind of a public nuisance. And I guess if you want an electric scooter, maybe you ought to take the radical path and maybe, buy your own.
Well, I can tell you of these e-scooters, there is, 15,000 of them here in the Dallas area, but there is one scooter that never gets thrown on anybody's lawn or dropped in a ditch somewhere. And that's the scooter that has a title that is in the possession of the man who bought the scooter. The person who owns the scooter doesn't treat it badly, doesn't throw it away and random places, doesn't scuff it up, doesn't take risks with it that are unreasonable. But e-scooters, it's kind of like a rental car or a motel room. It's like, I'm not going to see this again. It's like, I wonder what this baby can do. And you've got a lot of hot dogs who haven't ridden a scooter since they were 5 years old, are now deciding that they are masters of the streets, and, Bruce Springsteen with his legs wrapped around the engine, barreling along at 20 miles an hour. That might not sound like much, but when you're just standing up and you don't have a helmet on, it can be quite nasty. I'm actually glad that Dallas has decided to do this. Unfortunately, I think the end result is going to be that they're going to bring them back with even more regulation, because they are so committed to this idea that somehow they're going to solve the world's global warming problems if only they can get people out of their, 6-cylinder or today 4-cylinder vehicles and get them onto scooters that are electric. And of course, electric power is generated by words and air and something. like they don't really take that into consideration about how that comes to be. But in any case, I think that they will bring it back just because they think that it is wrong for you to have that personal vehicle. And the reality is that most of the people who are using these on a regular basis are not people who were using cars a lot anyway. So you're actually taking people, in many cases, I think, off their feet where they were walking from one place to another and putting them on-to a device that actually uses up a lot of resources and, throws off carbon into the atmosphere in the production of it and the operation of it. It's sad to watch both government officials and well-meaning people try to make a contradiction of human nature work for them. But maybe this is just how it has to happen. You have to see the progressive dream lying in a storm drain along the side of the road to realize that you cannot violate human nature consistently and have a successful social policy. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.